extend to the county the joint use of the airfield. And the fact that the property has not been developed by the county in the few years that we've been given this property by the Army is because of the lack of that agreement. And then that follows up. When was the last time the county asked the Army to, comply with that original representation? And I've heard various stories from, it's been asked numerous times and rejected, to it's been never asked, and so therefore, the county's been derelict in its duty of trying to make that property worth something. So you have that full gamut, and I'd like to know.
Yeah, I don't know that the county has ever had a concrete proposal to take to the Army.
We have Lori McDonald here from Sierra Army Depot who can probably fill us in on a little bit of that, and when you're done with your spiel, so.
Okay, I will just
Yeah.
quickly, so there's the MOA, there's also a lease that the county entered into with the Army. After they transferred the property, they realized that part of the runway is on county property, the extension was on there. So the county leased back that portion along with some other access here. Peter will tell me if I'm wrong here. And so that is a 50-year lease with a 50-year extension on it that will affect the property that the county now owns. And I think that the point of today's discussion is to just throw it out there for discussion, and I'll make a note of Supervisor Chapman's comments on the paragraph regarding the restrictions, and then I don't know if Maureen has
I
anything.
do.
Thanks, Richard. Yeah, hi. Lori, just state your name for the recorder, please.
I'm Lori McDonald. I'm the Public Affairs Officer for Sierra Army Depot. The land that is in question, the depot does have some concern in the memorandum that when the Army transferred the property to the county, it did say that it is a joint use, and that still is in existence.
The property that the county has
The
is joint
the
use?
airfield.
Airfield.
The airfield, at the time, it was only a 7,168-foot runway. It is now a 10,000-foot runway. And that's why the county, the depot went back to the county asking for a lease on additional land. We extended the runway 1,500 feet on each side. So it now is acceptable and meets requirements of any type of commercial plane to land out there. Our concern from the depot standpoint, and in the memorandum of agreement, states that any building that is done by the county must meet FAA requirements. So your solar panels or windmill or things like that wouldn't be able to go be included in that area. Also, no type of high rises that would impede the approach or takeoff of any aircraft. The depot still does use it. I can tell you that their county has never come to the depot and asked for co-use for a specific use of the airfield. That has never been brought to our attention. And I know this as the former BRAC officer that transferred the property and now is the Public Affairs Office. That has never happened.
Now, I just have to say, I appreciate, and that's the reason why the question is asked, because there has been representation in the past made to the board by former county staff, just to the contrary, that they've been out, and because the question the board has is, why isn't this being used and why isn't something being done? And they said, the representation is, we have not been able to get the Army to give us the, I guess, the agreement and the co-use. So I just want to make
Right.
sure that that has been the representations in the past. Now, and I'm not sure in terms of recent times if there's been any effort made. My attitude is, if we're not going to come up with some sort of an agreement for that joint use with the Army, why do we even have this property? I mean, you can give it to somebody else, that's fine, but it's still not going to be worth anything without the Army doing that, is just give it back to the Army. If they're not going to let us use it, then why do we have it? And I think that's a valid position.
And the airfield itself is, from the Army's perspective, is still considered excess, but it's in the ownership of the Army, and it'll remain in the ownership of the Army until the Army deems they no longer need it. Once that determination is made, then that airfield will transfer to the county. No one else but to the county, because we still have to honor the BRAC 95
So
exit.
there is that potential for the county to wind up with it all.
Absolutely.
And that answers actually my other question, that is if there was a need for that property for the extension, why did we deed back the portions that you needed so that the airfield is on one contained parcel that the Army would control and have? But if that's the agreement, is that we could inherit the airfield as well, then I guess it would make no sense to deed it back to the Army. We would hold on to that portion because we're gonna have it anyways.
Correct. And the airfield was extended basically because Senator Feinstein moved some military construction funds from a year before we had transferred the property up to a time frame when we had already transferred the property. So it was appropriations of funding for military construction, and that's how we were able to get the airfield expanded, which from the Army's standpoint, that would be a good benefit for the county for being able to market it. Again, the joint use of the airfield is still on the table, it's still there. The main factor of it is the Army has first priority. Yes, we do use the airfield. Is it on a daily, weekly basis? No, it is not. We ship items and assets out of the airfield when a major command says this is the way to ship it, and it's all depending on funding.
Richard, in this firm profile, I suggest that we put as one of the bullet points, present relationship.
Thank you for the.
I didn't mean to knock you down, but I was actually gonna ask you a question too. So, present relationship and ability to work with the Department of Army as a bullet point, because obviously we want to get somebody in there who's got prior experience working with the Army and know how to maneuver in that environment.
Okay.
So Lori, the Army is supportive of our effort to market this runway. I'm gonna ask you bluntly.
The Army will not stand in your way
Okay.
to market
Okay,
the surrounding property or the co-use of the airfield.
okay,
We can't.
okay.
We're bound by that memorandum of agreement
Yes.
just as much as the county is.
And that was written in 2006.
No, it was written in,
1997.
Oh, okay.
The
95.
lease was
There was an
2000.
amendment in 2006.
that was for the extra
Right.
property. But
Right.
the property was transferred in 2003.
Okay,
But the memorandum was actually crafted back in the
It was-
mid-90s.
It was, but it was actually signed in 2003, yeah.
I have a question.
one more. And I suggest to Mr. Egan here that if we have any more discussions about this, he should notify Lori. So we have to keep them in the loop in what we're doing. And excuse me for not getting a hold of you, Lori, I probably should have done that.
Bad.
Yeah, I know.
I have a question. So to use the airport, that's an agreement between the Army and the county.
That is correct.
So if somebody buys that land, obviously, I mean, it's of no value unless they
At the airport.
need to have access to the airport. So how
My-
does
My
that work?
understanding, and Lori can correct me if I'm wrong, is whoever owned that property would have to use the county as a conduit to get to
Absolutely.
the Army. It'd be a
The Army's
third
not
party.
gonna deal with those
Right.
folks, they're gonna deal with
Right.
us.
We're not gonna open up the airfield just to any private sector.
Okay.
It is a co-use with the county and the county alone.
So whoever obtained that property would work a deal with the county. They come and say, here's our idea for the airport. We'd have to approve it, and then we would say, hey, to the Army, we have, so-and-so that wants to
Yes.
use it for this, and then get your,
But I think it needs to be clearly spelled out in the RFP that it's all contingent upon the Army accepting
Oh,
whatever the
absolutely.
county would take to them. So
Absolutely.
if the private folks came to the county and says, we plan to do X, Y, Z, and we take that to the Army, and the Army says, no, we'll accept A, B, C, it's not a, they need to know that there is that, the property is basically worthless until the plan that would be put forth is accepted by the Army under the terms of the agreement.
And then on another point, I wanted to say something here, I mean, and to remind, I don't know, maybe remind isn't the right word, but for what it's worth, okay? I look at the runway there, okay, today, like Lori said, it's being used, okay, it's, nice. I would imagine it's not full of potholes, you know, like a nice, beautiful, usable runway.
With no infrastructure.
Yeah, with no
My
infrastructure.
point is this, okay? Say the Army were to go away tomorrow, hypothetically, obviously. We don't want him to go anywhere, but, okay.
Don't even say that.
And the county got that runway, all right? Unless we get the right people owning that land around that runway, it's gonna be another mess hall, cafeteria, the 18-room barracks with a state-of-the-art kitchen. It's gonna deteriorate, and we're gonna pay for whatever, and that thing is gonna be turned into a piece of sun-baked junk for the county if we don't get this RFP and get the right industrious people owning that property. And that's the truth. So I'm all for getting it out there and getting some good, strong business partners and try our best. I mean, to me, you can't be situated any better with the proximity, you know, to Reno, the rail system. It has everything going for it, except the fact that the county still owns that land, and we don't need to be owning that land, as far as I'm concerned. Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, one of the things I think I'd like to see be included in the RFP, and I'm not sure where would be the best part of it. But just from the discussions I've listened to over the years, in order to use, as Mr. Hammond has pointed out, it's a runway with no infrastructure. The lighting is suitable for the military to come and go, but in terms of the air traffic control, I mean, there's a lot of infrastructure that is required if you're going to operate a major runway, and that would be considered a major runway. And the cost of doing that is really huge. Now, obviously, Senator Feinstein, with deep pockets with her Senate appropriations or something, and that was one of the angles that the board back then, or the staff, the board let the staff, they came to the board and asked their permission to proceed, and had pitched. And I know Jack, and even before Jack, you know, they worked with Michael Walker and Feinstein's office for years trying to figure out how to, and if the Army really wanted to use it for something on a major basis for them in terms of moving people in and out, not just cargo. I guess you can crash land a cargo plane, it's not a big deal, but if you crash land a cargo plane full of people, it's a big deal, and that's where the infrastructure for the airport is essential. And no one was able to, I mean, at one point, Sorbog, I remember him coming in and saying, we're gonna have this like a plane wash, like a car wash is, and he described how you got the airport in San Diego, LA, you got airports up in Seattle, and you got airports in Denver, and then you take the airports in the Bay Area. If you draw lines between them all, we're kind of close at the middle of that, and I didn't realize it, but I guess when the planes shut down around 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night, they go somewhere where they get detailed out, cleaned, washed, whatever, and then they get back online and start serving the public again around 5, 6 in the morning. And they do that in facilities wherever they're located that are usually urban-based, where you have a lot of people complaining about planes coming in. So this was touted as being, you know, let's turn this into a plane wash, you know. But to do that, you got to have, you know, this infrastructure. And then later on, it was FedEx, and then we heard UPS, and you know, back in 2003, the Postal Service was looking for a big sorting hub for the whole western United States. You know, so all those things, in order to do that, would require coming up with that. So I think one of the things that needs to be in the RFP, if we're going to entertain any credible thing, is they need to address how they perceive that infrastructure being. Is it going to be company financed 100%? Is it going to be a partnership between the county and the private entity? Is it going to be that kind of a partnership leveraging state grants, federal grants? I mean, how, because until, it's one thing to own the strip and it's one thing to own the property, But if you don't have that infrastructure in place, trying to locate any sort of a credible business operation there is a non-starter. And so I think that needs to be emphasized so that the people coming in with their great ideas, and I've heard all kinds of great ideas, but the problem is those great ideas don't accompany with it how you're going to put those pieces together and who's going to come up with the millions to do it. And then when it all falls apart, well, it's the county's fault because you didn't put the $1 million in to make it happen. So I think we need to make sure that the RFP has that front and center so that we aren't just, you know, a pie in the sky, pig in a poke, and we find ourselves 10 years from now having the same discussion.
That's a good point.
Okay, Ms. Spencer?
I have a question, from the discussion, is that airfield can never be owned by private hands?
Not from the Army's hands, it won't. The Army can only transfer it to the county.
Okay,
And once it's in the county's hands, that's up to them.
okay, so that would release, the restriction of a private company coming in, right? If this RFP was issued like they wanted February 1st, no private company would bid on something like that.
I
Right.
can't answer if
Because
the
if-
time comes that the airfield is put in the county's hands. I can't answer that. I can answer, as long as the Army owns it, the land around must meet FAA requirements.
Would FAA requirements include, what do you call them, what for putting airplanes in? Hangars? Building
No,
hangars?
because that's something that is within FAA requirements.
Okay, and as long as it has a height restriction and that's met, they could put warehouses there?
I don't know all the FAA requirements, so I don't want to.
Okay, where do I find that? FAA?
In Sacramento.
FAA in Sacramento?
You better prepare yourself a little better next time.
Okay,
Okay,
I have one more comment. I actually, this was at the beginning. I've had some discussions with Richard, and my objection was the word airfield in the RFP. That needs to be, obviously with today's conditions, airfield,
Surrounding area.
yeah, airfield, the airfield and surrounding areas isn't honest. You know, you have to be, if you're gonna be forthright, you have to say it doesn't include the airfield. What I found with 10 minutes worth of work is there are lots of free advertising to sell airfields.
we're not selling an airfield though, we need to.
No, I'm just telling you, because that seems to be the direction you're going, that property is worthless. I don't remember who said it, but that property is worthless about the airfield. I don't remember who said that.
No,
I
without the
did.
agreement.
did.
I've said that numerous times.
Okay, and I agree with you.
Oh,
It's,
I'm shocked.
I agree with you all the time. Don't, listen. The property, I believe, goes around Honey Lake. Okay, so,
That's Pole Line Road. That's all, that's a dirt road.
They're gonna
They're gonna have to put infrastructure improvements, roads. I've heard
because the Army's not gonna let
$8 to
them
$10
go
million
through the Army base to get to the Army's not gonna let you go through, because I know the roads up there, you have to get permission to go on the airfield?
That's, the airfield property, you have to gain access from Wendell Road.
Okay.
You can't get in for Pole Line?
We're
No,
gonna jet ski
Well-
them across.
not unless you guys have,
That's a discussion for later.
I guess the bottom line, after reading this and telling Richard that it's totally deficient, which has been confirmed by a couple of the board members, that I think we shouldn't be in such a hurry to even issue this RFP. I do think you need an evaluation. on that. If you choose not to do it, that's up to you. We did an evaluation of $8 million from George Robson on the Hurlong property. You got $31,000 for the property. The airfield is, has value, maybe not to the county, but this is what I would suggest doing, is holding off on this RFP, getting some more information on what the people would have to do, and including that in the RFP, with that land and that airfield. Because the land itself, putting it up right now, I mean, I'll bid $31,000 on it. It's worth nothing without the airfield. If you're really serious this time and don't want to repeat Hurlong, is that do your due diligence and find out what airfields are worth the 10. They're worth. I found one 10,000 on Showcase.com, which sells private and public airfields for $825,000, and it was a 10,000-foot airfield. I tried to find apples and apples to come today, and so the airfield is worth money to the taxpayers, which is me. So just slow down, do this right this time, and don't be in such a hurry to give it away, because it does have value, the airfield. And with selling right now that worthless land around it, all it provides is access.
That's,
To the
just to
airfield.
clarify, okay, you keep saying we're selling the airfield. The airfield's not for sale. We're selling, as you just said, the worthless land around it. Okay, so just.
But it's not, but you need the
No, but you keep
airfield.
saying we're selling the airfield. We're not selling the airfield.
Then take that
Airfield
off
doesn't
your
work.
RFP.
Well, fair enough, but don't, you're comparing watermelons and sunflower seeds.
No.
Okay, thanks. That's, is there anyone else that wants to comment from the public?
I have a couple more questions.
Okay.
You know, first of all, I mean, not having a map attached to it, so I assume that that's gonna happen with this one. I think in the last sets of RFPs, that was a deficiency that a lot of people commented, where's the maps? And it would made it easy to spot maybe some of the problems. And I think the property description, you know, that instead of waiting until the end of the process to have the guy upstairs with his meets and bounds, you know, come up, I mean, there was no vetting of that document in terms of its veracity and accuracy, which created a lot of problems. I would like to see that as at the beginning, so that we have the whole time, so if somebody shows up and says, hey, wait a minute, you're giving away my house or whatever, that can at least be smoked out early in advance. We can make sure the courthouse is not included by mistake. I mean, those kind of things are important now. I mean, I think that needs to be part of this RFP, but given the discussion that we've had, you know, first of all, I'm totally convinced that the county department, okay, wherever it's called or where it's located, is not really capable of putting together an economic development project that would center around the airfield. And to continue to pretend that's going to be the case, because that's been the premise, in my opinion, that county staff has had in years past. And they're all gone, so that's good. We got new people that see it in a different direction. But at the same time, I think it would be remiss for us to dispose of all this property and not retain at least a corridor of access that we own and control, that we're not depending upon having to have some sort of a lease or a rental agreement or whatever with a private entity to have access to this airfield if indeed the Army eventually decides to leave and we wind up having exclusive use. So as we look at the disposal of the property, it would be nice, you know, with Window Road being there, it's not that they aren't going to have access to Window Road, they should, in order to have access to the parcel. But at least we should at least define an access that is we retain and keep as it relates to that airfield in perpetuity. So if we have to drive a truck to the airfield, we can not have to be trespassing private property to get there. And I think to do the disposal now, we need to define, it doesn't, you know, I'm not saying coming off to the finger. I mean, I think the closest point of access to the airfield is probably off of Window Road to the north. And it just has to be a small little corridor. So you can dispose of probably 97.5% of the property theoretically, but you need to retain at least a dedicated easement so that we could go onto the airfield without having to touch anybody else's property. So that, I would think if we're gonna proceed with this, that needs to be included, needs to be defined up front, so everybody who's bidding knows that, you know, they're gonna only be able to get so much because we're gonna retain that.
Well, what I might suggest is maybe multiple access points, because like you mentioned, we at someday may end up owning this entirely.
All we need is some easements.
Yeah, maybe
That's pretty simple
some
thing
road
to work out with the
easements
private.
to, I think, 2-pole line, and then, I'm not sure where Wendell Road comes in here exactly,
But that needs to be clearly defined in the RFP and not just left to as a side agreement that we assume everybody knows and we find out 10 years later that, sorry, you know, we've had control of that and when you guys did this, you know, the thing was defective.
Well, let's look at this document for what it is. It's a preliminary draft. And this is the first step towards privatizing
Yeah.
the airfield. I mean, we were gonna have lots of discussions about this, with this. And, I too, like Larry, I'd like to see this in private hands as soon as possible. And let's not forget, we're gonna start collecting
Well,
tax revenue off it.
I'm not objectionable to the privatization. I just want to make sure that when we privatize it, we do it in a way
Right,
that allows the
absolutely.
public interest to still be protected in terms of its responsibility and not dependent upon someone saying, well, you know, it's mine now and you have to pay this or do that in order to be able to access your property. So build that in to begin with, you know, and work with those private folks to do and develop that relationship.
maybe we should talk about some possible dates, because I would like to keep it on track.
Absolutely.
You know, of course, the dates I put in here were just thrown in there, and we're gonna need some time to draft road dedications and that sort of thing, but.
So we have a couple of weeks, either the first or second meeting in February, maybe we could.
Well, is that gonna give the surveyor enough time to get his meets and bounds done?
I kind of doubt it, and the reason I didn't put the attachments in here is I don't want multiple iterations of drafts to be circulated
Right.
that
Let's-
will be mistaken later. I want to have it better identified before we do that. I would think maybe the earliest would be the 18th of February, and surveyor's not here, but.
Why don't we just make it for the 25th then?
Okay, and that, you know, I don't wanna get
You're gonna
false
have to- You're
expectations
gonna have to
out.
have it agendized, you're gonna have to have the material by around the 19th anyway, so, because of just the way the calendar works.
Oh, okay. Today, what I really wanted to do is get direction, is this the way we're headed, or not? And I think it seems to be the consensus that we wanna draft an RFP, and, you know, all the points that have been made today can be incorporated in that.
Okay, oh, thank you, yeah.
Yeah, great.
Is there anyone else that would like to weigh in? Diana, Jane?
Yeah, Iona McCain speaking here. What's wrong with doing a right-of-way easement descriptions? I know in surveying and engineering that they ask that a parcel be divided, or we'll say lot line adjustment. The surveyor generally asks, well, if you're going to develop this piece of property, we'd like to have a buyer's pass, we'd like to have a description of the right-of-way that goes past that a little bit on both sides. This idea of not knowing who owns what and who's going to have access to it.
Well,
Don't leave it like you have Belfast Road.
the dedication of the road would be just that, would be an identification.
Well, you know, right-of-way where people have access to it free. I mean, go on the highway 395 or 817. You know, on Belfast Road, they have the argument after you get past the cattle guards up there and you're going to the petroglyphs, you know, and someone's up there blocking the road, which people have an easement across even though it's not deeded, but it's blocked. I'm just saying, we don't want that kind of
I'm not
confusion.
familiar with
So I'm just saying, but a portion of Belfast Road has the right-of-way. But as soon as you go across that bridge at Willow Creek there, it says, you know, increment type thing, there's no
Well, I
right-of-way.
think we should learn from the mistakes of the past and make sure that whatever happens with this here doesn't have those kind of impediments.
That's right.
And
We'll have our
the-
ducks in a row.
Yeah,
We'll
we
have
have
our ducks in a row.
Okay, before we move along, I want to thank the public and I thank the board. Those were good comments, especially, you know, you brought up some very good ones, yeah. And I think there's always a lot to learn from the past, and as long as we.
Well, if we're gonna do it, I want it to be successful, like, you know, and
Yes.
we just seem to find the worst way to do it so it's not successful, and I don't like that.
And, who knows, I mean, 10 years down the road, it could be a wonderful, things going on there. So if anybody else has anything to comment on it, this would be the time, otherwise we're gonna move on to the next item, so, okay. Thanks,
Thanks, Laurie, for coming, we appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.